fascism, socialism, or neoconism, or whatever you want to do. All of these forms of collectivism have that fundamental philosophy or ideology beneath it. Now, that sounds pretty good to many people. It sounded good to me when I was in school and learning about the greater good of the greater number. After all, we've been taught that we live in a democracy and therefore the majority should rule, and all of these things which sound very good if you don't probe too deeply. And so many people think that that's a good concept, but it's a terrible concept when you follow it to its roots. Because you see, there's no such thing as a group. A group doesn't really exist. It's all in the mind. The word group is an abstraction.
Essentially, what the Venus Project proposes is that we bring all the nations together and take care of everything on Earth. We pledge allegiance to the environment and all the world's people. The end of separate nations. The end of the artificial boundaries that separate people.
It's similar to the concept of the word forest. You can look at a forest, you say, well, I'm looking at a forest, but you're not. You're looking at trees. They're only trees, and so the word forest is this abstraction for the concept of many trees. And the same thing is true in social structures. The word group is a very deceptive word. We think that the group somehow has rights. Well, since there is no such thing as a group, we're really dealing with the concept of many individuals having somehow more rights than a smaller group of individuals. And so that really, if you follow it all the way to its core, is a question of mathematics. Collectivism is based on the substance that three people really have the right to tell two people what to do regardless, because there's 3 against 2. And once you boil it down to the issue of mathematics, it falls apart, because human rights are not based on mathematics.
The family formally presented its gift to the UN in March of 1947.
The future of this country and the lives of our children and our children's children are interwoven with the success of the United Nations. In it lies the hope of the people of the world. My father considers it a privilege to have had a part in the development of its permanent home. I'm glad to hand you, Mr. Lee, my father's check.
Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller.
In moving towards their ultimate objective of having world government, they have created various crises along the way over the last 100 years. World War I, as we've talked about, was contrived. World War II was contrived. We got the United Nations as a result of World War II, which was one of their big goals. Even though they denied the fact that they ever intended to have the United Nations as a world government, some of their more esoteric documents show very clearly that that's what they intended right from the start. And we're starting to see that now with the Commission on Global Governance. All the international treaties that we're looking at, especially the environmental treaties.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world. Now, none of this may succeed this time. But this, to me, is sort of the outline by which someday, in the next few years, a solution will emerge. In some countries or in some regions, people lose their jobs. Major adjustments have to be made. That's the engine of globalization. The people who are disadvantaged by the process look to their governments for solutions. But the governments are national and the problem is global. So how to bring about a relationship between the desirable process of globalization and its impact on the politics?
If all you can do, people out there that buy this New World Order stuff, if all you can do is sit back and worry about eugenics and worry about world government in some abstraction, then you're missing some huge things. You're missing some massive, massive things that need to be addressed. Ignore the religious fantasy about the New World Order. It's it's pointless. It doesn't do anything.
I think you very eloquently described the enormous flaws in the financial system in America, in the world, the way we think, materialism and so on. You applied a very exact and a very elegant science to it. In the last part of your film with the Venus Project, it's a science, but I'm not sure it's that exact a science. I don't think that the answers that we're looking for can necessarily be described on a stage by you right now or by anybody else. They may be things outside of our current way of thinking.
Well, obviously.
In 2008, Peter Joseph was part of an event organized by the Luminopolis Festival in London, and we can read from their own webpage the following. Luminopolis aims to support non-governmental organizations in the development of creative ways to present their messages, connecting them to artists from the wider community. Luminopolis can provide support both on the organization as well as financially for creative proposals that serve such a purpose. Now if you go to the website and check out who is financially supporting this festival, you will see a lot of environmental front organizations such as Greenpeace, but more importantly, the World Wildlife Fund, the main arm of UNESCO and the whole United Nations equation.
I'd like to take the debate into another quick. I mean, we've been debating the science here. We've not debated anything in terms of the credibility of the environmentalist movement. The environmentalist movement was formed by Sir Julian Huxley, who was the founder of the Eugenics Society. The WWF and these other organizations are actually offspins from that Eugenics Society.
Peter Joseph was also awarded for his two films, Zeitgeist and Zeitgeist Addendum, on the Artemis Film Festival, which also receives financial backup by the United Nations, quote-unquote friends, in the way of Petrobras, a Brazilian oil company. From their own webpage, quote, Petrobras is the only energy company that's part of the Global Compact Board of the United Nations. But that's not everything. Artemis also admits, quote, in recognition of the socially conscious platform it provides, Artemis has been endorsed by the United Nations Department of Public Information, unquote. This sounds interesting if we realize that this is the platform that Peter Joseph has used to premiere both Zeitgeist films.
Okay, we don't ask for money. I'm not here asking for donations.
When a big newspaper gives you a push for putting out a video, you know you've got backing in a higher realm than other people who are making little videos. They've seen the future and dislike the present. 2 hours into Z-Day, the educational forum associated with the online movie Zeitgeist, Peter Joseph, the film's director and the evening's MC, stepped out from behind his lectern and walked forward earnestly on the stage. This is from the New York Times, March 16th, 2009.
The whole history of recent times in relation to science and technology shows that if you plant the seed of applied science or technology, it proceeds to grow, and it grows according to the laws of its own being. And the laws of its being are not necessarily the same as the laws of our being. Nothing is easier, of course, than to enunciate ideals and to say, well, wouldn't it be nice if everybody were good and kind and loving, etc., etc. Of course it would be very nice, but the point is, how do you implement these ideals? How do you fulfill your good social and psychological intentions? And when you come down to this problem, you see it's a very complex problem of organizing family life, organizing education, organizing sexual life.
You would see a slow gravitation towards the new system. Do I think it will actually happen like that? No. Though I am going to try and propose ideas that could allow that to happen. We all know that it's going to take something fairly cataclysmic to wake the society up, to shake up the beehive, if you will.
Organizing social and economic life. I mean, there are endless factors involved in this, and to try to work out what all these factors should be is, I must say, I found a very interesting job.
Back in 1965, the Department of Health and Education and Welfare, HEW, sponsored a study to define how they're going to get from where they were then in 1965 to where we are now in the 21st century. They came out with a report in 1969 called the Behavioral Science Teacher Education Program that's now fully integrated within our educational program. And this is what they said, and I want to have you hang on to your hats because you will not believe what they planned to do back in 1965-69 and what is happening actually today. He said calculations of the future and how to modify it are no longer considered to be an obscure academic pursuit. Long-range planning and implementation of plans will be made by a technological scientific elite. This will strain the democratic fabric to the ripping point. The Protestant ethic will atrophy as more and more enjoyed a varied, leisured, and guaranteed sustenance. Work as a means to, and an end of living will diminish. Most people will tend to be hedonistic, and a dominant elite will provide the bread and circuses to keep social dissension and disruption at a minimum. A small elite will carry society's burdens. The resulting impersonal manipulation of most people's lifestyles will be softened by provision for pleasure-seeking and guaranteed physical necessities. The society will be a leisurely one. People will study, play, and travel. Some will be in various stages of the drug-induced experiences. Each individual will receive at birth a multi-purpose identification which will have, amongst other things, extensive communications and control uses. Each individual will be saturated with ideas of information. Each will be self-selected. Other kinds will be imposed overtly by those who assume the responsibility for the other's actions. Relatively few individuals will be able to maintain control over their opinions. Most will be pawns of competing opinion molders. The controlling elite will engage in power plays largely without the involvement of most of the people. And that is so true today. Most people have no idea what's going on in the international arena. Have none. Almost all of this is being done in secrecy.
We're gullible, but we're also willingly gullible. We want a human being, a big daddy, to come along and make everything right for us. And as long as we believe that, we'll always basically get shafted.
They have all the money they want. They can make all the money they want. They have a machine that can make all the money. It's not about money. It's about control. It's about their vision of how they want to see the world in their eyes. And you know, you and I believe in individuality, in the person being the dominant thing, the individual being the dominant person. Today we live in a world where institutions are dominant, not people.
The only greater good for the greater number really comes from the concept of individualism. When you deny the majority to take away the rights or the property of the minority. If you hold up the individual as the supreme element in society instead of the group, under that philosophy, under that ideology, now you do actually have the greatest good for the greatest number.
We don't want to control people's lives, so we backed out of politics. Politics, no, I hate politicians. It's all dirty work and so forth. And we just backed away and let the collectivists who love that kind of work take over. And suddenly dawned on me, that's why we're losing. We didn't have the power.
Is it any better world than it used to be? I rebel against this progress. What has this progress, this world civilization done to us? Machines and marvels. They've built these great cities of theirs, yes. They've prolonged life, yes. They've conquered nature, they say, and made a great white world. Is it any jollier than the world used to be in the good old days, when life was short and hot and merry and the devil took the hindmost?
History is so full of examples of people who have been downtrodden, and then when they can't take it anymore, they've risen up. And at great cost in blood and treasure, they may have been able to overthrow some tyrannical regime. And then they wake up and find out that a year or two later, they've replaced it with one just as bad. So we want a protectorate. We don't want this state to govern us. What we want it to do is to protect us, to protect our lives, liberty, and property. Nothing more. Now we call that a protectorate. And we get rid of this word called government, and it causes us to think of the true purpose of this thing we call the state. And so that's an important part also. We have a creed, we know what we believe in, and we put those two things together. We've got a positive view of a better way, and we have a mechanism for infiltrating, and that's the word the enemy uses, infiltrating. I don't like it. But going into organizations that we should have been into